I'm going to talk about the peculiarities of working on a hieroglyphic typeface according to the history of Egyptology and to the contemporary issues of scientific research, a project I'm working on as a PhD student at the University of Nîmes and Montpellier in the south of France, and that I'm starting to work on in 2015 at ANRT. Hieroglyphs in ancient Egypt have been used for almost 4,000 years. During this period, the structure of the system didn't encounter any major evolution, even if new signs appeared. And texts are everywhere, on the monuments revealed by archaeological excavations. So Egyptology is a discipline built on the interactions of archaeology and philology to explain facts of civilization. It's usually considered that Egyptology was born in 2022, when Champollion published the Lettre à Monsieur d'Acier, where he describes how he decrypted the Rosetta Stone. From the very beginning of its history, publishing has been an important issue for the development of this science through the education of scholars. In his Egyptian grammar, he defines the principles of a classification of hieroglyphs in 16 thematic categories. And the idea of using typefaces for the transcription of hieroglyphs came very early. Champollion's brother, who published the Grammaire Égyptienne in 1836, placed its hopes in the creation of a hieroglyphic typeface for a higher quality of publishing. From 1842 to 1852, the French Imprimerie Nationale cut a hieroglyphic typeface. Here is a transcription of the Abydos King list, which is the first text published with this typeface and which can be considered as its first specimen. Actually, on this typeface and on the others, there's a lack of documentation about the genesis of these projects. It is a major critique made by Egyptologists on every hieroglyphic typeface. There is no way to understand how those typographic directories were composed. One of the issues of cutting a typeface for Egyptian hieroglyphs lies in the specific composition of Egyptian. The signs are grouped in squares called quadrats, then composed in lines. Oxford, 1927. Alan Gardiner, a famous Egyptologist, published an Egyptian grammar which will have a major influence of the epistemological development of Egyptology. Gardiner wrote in this grammar a classification of the hieroglyphs called the sign list. In the steps of Champollion, he classifies 749 hieroglyphs within 24 thematic categories. Nowadays, it is still the international reference for the classification of hieroglyphs. And for the publication of his grammar, Gardiner ordered the cut of a new successful typeface. It seems that he is also the first Egyptologist to explain the good uses of his typeface. He assumes that he made a specific one for the classical language of New Kingdom and that it's a normalized tool that should be only used for grammatical purposes. The typeface shapes, the structures Gardiner presents in the sign list became references for the structure of hieroglyphs. Despite the lack of documentation on the provenance of the signs, this typeface became a canonic model of hieroglyphics representations. But nowadays, Egyptologists still need hieroglyphic typefaces in order to enlighten the interpretation made of an antique text. The typographical transcription is important when there is lakes in the text or unidentified signs. They have to recompose it before giving a translation. This is essential in the study of hieratic, a scriptural kind of ancient Egyptian writing. It has the same composition as hieroglyphs, but the signs lost their figurative dimension. Egyptologists use hieroglyphs for the transcription of hieratic to eliminate any ambiguity and present their perception of a document in scientific process. So here is another example of a text composed with the Imprimerie Nationale typeface. It is an extract of a text known as the Bentrech Stela. And here is the same text, but composed with the typeface I designed with the Montpellier team of researchers. My Egyptologist colleagues wanted that, for each sign, I create an average structure based on a selection of hieroglyphs picked up on various monuments in order to create a tool that can be used for the transcription of text from any period of Egyptian history. Here are, as example, sources for the sign of the owl, which is one of the main hieroglyphs. The peculiarities of creating a typeface for research in Egyptology is that I had to deal with the history of the discipline and with the specificities of an open figurative writing system. To be accepted by the Egyptologist community and to be legitimate to be used in a scientific publication, the typeface can now sweep the whole history of this science. I had to find the balance between the inheritance of 200 years of Egyptology and the shapes engraved by ancient Egyptians in order to propose innovative forms. This is one of the reasons why I worked with open silhouettes. The Egyptologists are used to contour digital typefaces. But digital technology allowed the researcher to produce their own representations of hieroglyphs for a minimal cost. The Egyptologists needed to develop a new scientific approach. To redefine the classifications of hieroglyphs, it would be more useful to study the text monuments to monuments and to work afterward by comparing the epigraphy of monuments between themselves. It is the aim of an essential collection of paleography published at the Institut Français d'Archéologie Orientale in Cairo since 2004. Here I show you the example of the whole in 3 different paleographies. In the interpretation of hieroglyphic text, the details of the epigraphy are significant, and typeface can give access only to the grammatical informations. In the end, when a significant amount of monuments will have been published in paleographies, Egyptologists will have the material to analyze the evolutions of epigraphic shapes. These books made me wonder about 2 essential questions. What am I designing and for whom? You can identify that this is sign figures an elephant. And here are the sources used for the design of this sign. As you can see, there's a lot of difference between my proposal and the sources. So I made a sign closer to a naturalist representation of an elephant than to a hieroglyphic representation. And here is another proposal I made, closer to the sources, but where it is far more complicated to identify the elephant. The Egyptologists I work with want to stay as close as possible from the epigraphic sources due to the scientific issues of the project. The aim of this project is to create a representation used for the transcription of hieroglyphs in a specific scientific context. The elephant is an example of the epigraphical limits of a systematical application of our work process. How should we deal with the gap between Egyptian representations and the contemporary representation we all have interiorized? Here is several of the paleographical representation of the elephant. Some of them are very far from a naturalist representation. This is due to the disappearance of this animal from the Valley of Nile at the beginning of the pharaonic civilization. The scribes only had other hieroglyphs as model. What should look like an average from all those representations? My colleagues decided to stay as close as possible from the epigraphical sources, but shouldn't we propose different signs according to the various structures we observe through Egyptian history? It is still an open question, and I'll take another example. The sign A4 is mostly used as a determinative for worship. The structure, considered as the right one presented in Gardiner's sign list, is a man sitting with arms raised in front of him. Gardiner, when he created the sign list, applied to hieroglyphs an alphabetical approach of writing because it linked by convention one precise structure to a linguistic entity. Of course, we have to question the influence of the cost of such a typeface on the result of the project back in the 1920s. But digital technologies offer us the possibility of redefining the classical approach of hieroglyphs classifications by adding a lot of variations to a standard representation. And here are the sources collected for this sign A4. In fact, for this sign, the source collected made me offer 4 variations added to the main sign. We can also add the sign A30, also used as a determinative for worship. Here is the main issue about hieroglyphic typefaces digital can easily overcome. Egyptologists are not anymore required to stick to a conception of writing where only one glyph can be associated to a character. It is necessary to work on a new organization of typographic directory to think of the future of type design in Egyptology. The idea of using digital technologies in Egyptology started in the late 60s, when the astrophysician Jan Burman started to develop a system for the digital composition of hieroglyphic text. His work was used as a base in 1984 by the work group Egyptologie et Informatique to define principles of an easy way to compose hieroglyphic text with computers. The result of their work was published in 1988 and is known as the Manuel de Codage, a specific syntax for ancient Egyptian. For example, to compose this text, you have to write this sequence. As you can see, the manual decodage is quite complicated to use. But as there was no alternative, it is still in use by the main software used by the Egyptologist community for the digital transcription of hieroglyphs. This software, Recherche, is developed by Serge Rosemorduc and Stéphane Polis from the University of Liège. You have here an example of a text composed with the specific typeface it uses. You might wonder why Egyptologists still make a great use of those softwares, as almost 1,200 hieroglyphs were included in Unicode. The proposal was written by Michael Everson and Bob Richman. Their aim was to treat hieroglyphs as a set of text elements, assuming that a higher protocol would be needed to precise combination of the signs, and it's about to be done. Unicode prepares an extension of the encoding of hieroglyphs, mostly based on the Hieroglyphica sign list, a typeface ordered by Egyptologists Nicolas Grimal, Jochen Alof, and Dirk van der Plas, published in 1993, and that presents now more than 7,000 signs. Besides the great number of signs that will be encoded, Unicode is working on control characters to compose quadrats directly with Unicode. This powerful extension will make the Egyptologist free from the use of specific softwares for most of the text combination they need to write. But an extension based on typographic directories questioned my colleagues, because for the Hieroglyphica's typeface, like for the others, there is no documentation published on the origins of the signs. But as a type designer, I think that extending the encoding with the Hieroglyphica sign list is a solution to push forward the digital methods in Egyptology. And to explain why, I have to go back to the transcription of the Bench-Reche stela. Here is the original monument exposed in the Musée du Louvre in Paris. It's a monument from the late period, the Ptolemaic period. And I have to apologize because I shouldn't show you the Bench-Reche stela's text composed with my own typeface. On a scientific plan, it can be considered as a mistake, because we created a typeface with sources from all the historical eras of ancient Egypt, except sources from the Ptolemaic period. The Ptolemaic epigraphy is a very specific one, which looks like nothing seen before in Egypt. The system remains the same, but the numbers of signs and combinations increased. For our project, my colleague decided not to work with Ptolemaic sources, because from a scientific point of view, it's a completely different problem from classical Egyptian. In the end, Egyptologists would like to dispose of different typefaces according to the great text corpuses of ancient Egypt, as pyramid text, Book of the Dead, and coffins text. In order to reach this objective, we could use the larger encoding possible. If Unicode encodes historical variations from different signs, as it is already the case, because some historical variations are identified in the Gardiner sign list, Egyptologists could choose which cases they fill with a representation, giving in the characters table an overview of the signs they need. The representations they produce, use, and show could lead them to some kind of curating inside the possibilities of an infinite corpus of hieroglyphic representations. And thank you for your attention, and it's time for Alexandre to tell you about the Maya script.